So, first of all, thank you for coming. And as you may have noticed, I talk about Harry Potter a lot. So I apologize for everyone who has already heard me talk about Harry Potter for years now, but it is what it is. So it cannot be denied that when writing her Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling has taken inspiration from many different myths for the plot points, for the characters, and even its fantastical creatures. In the terms of the fantastical creatures, Rowling has looked to many different cultures and mythologies for these animals. In today's presentation, we will be taking a look at some of these creatures that appear in the series, namely the Centaurs, the Giants, and the Merpeople. These creatures appear in different books of the series, such as Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. So, today we will be seeing when exactly these creatures appear in the book and they come into contact with the protagonist of the series. We will see which myths have been the inspiration for these creatures and whether the appearances have changed at all when Rowling adapted them to her books, and if the role that they play in the series is different from the role that they play in the original myth. So let us begin with the creature that is latest introduced in the series, that is the Giants. According to the official Wizarding World website, giants are huge creatures of low intelligence. They have a famously violent nature and are known to remove the heads of their enemies when angered. Growing up to 25 feet tall, giants live largely solitary existences. At first, giants were quite numerous in the Wizarding World. When the first Wizarding War started, they aligned with Voldemort. And when it ended, having been decimated by the Aurors during the war, they decided to retreat to the mountains and they hid there. When the Second Wizarding War started, their numbers were even lower because they retreated to the mountains, and that made them even more savage and more violent, often starting squabbles among themselves and killing each other. The first description of a giant arrives in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix when Hagrid introduces Harry and Hermione to his half-brother Grob. This is how he is described in the book. Grob looked strangely misshapen. Grob's head was much larger in proportion to the body than a human head, almost perfectly round and covered with tightly curling, close-growing hair the color of bracken. The back, under what looked like a dirty brownish smock comprised of animal skins sewn roughly together, was very broad, and as Grob slept, it seemed to strain a little at the rough seams of the skins. The legs were curled up under the body, enormous filthy bare feet, large as ledges, resting one on top of the other on the earthy forest floor. Now we can see that Grob is described in such a manner that he seems to be somewhat deformed, as well as not being an example of cleanliness. While it cannot be assumed that all giants look the same, it can be understood that Grob looks the same as the vast majority of his species, even though Hagrid does mention that Grob is considered to be too small to be a giant, a runt, so to speak. Still, Grob is the only giant that aligns with Harry during the Second Wizarding War, which makes him the only giant that remains in the winning side of the war. As for the rest of the giants, who once again aligned with Voldemort, it is not clear whether they retreated back to the mountains once again when the war was over, or whether they were executed for once again supporting the Dark Lord. So for her giants, Rowling looked to the Greek mythology as inspiration. In the Greek mythology, giants are described as monstrous savage creatures, often depicted with men's bodies terminating in serpentine legs. These giants have their origin in a tale called the Gigantomachy, which is a story, a very popular Greek myth that tells the war between the Olympian gods and the giants. In this tale, the giants attacked the Olympian gods, and the Olympian gods had to ask Heracles for help because there was a prophecy that said that they would only defeat the giants with the help of a mortal man. So the battle is won, and the superiority of the Olympian gods is cemented. Many people see this myth as a representation of victory of high society over barbarism, which is what the Athenians consider their victory over the Persians to be. Now, while Rowling's description of the giants somewhat varies from the original myth, taking into account that she eliminates the snake legs and makes them completely humanoid, she does maintain the violent nature of the giant. In both cases, the giants are savages who have almost no control over themselves. They attack the heroes or side with the ones who do. They fail in their mission and are decimated to the point of almost being forced to extinction. We now move on to a type of creature that only appears in the fourth book of the series, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the Merpeople, or as they are more known, the Sirens. So just like giants inhabit mountains all over the globe, Merpeople have settlements in all of the 7 oceans. And they are described in the Wizarding World website as with gray skin, dark green hair, yellow eyes, and sharp teeth. Merpeople come in many different forms, all of whom have been responsible for the death of many mesmerized sailors. Differently to giants, they are not considered to be beings, they are considered beasts. The Merpeople chose to have this categorization because they didn't want to be in the same category as other beings, hags and vampires, but we will not be talking about that today. So, as mentioned, there are colonies of merpeople all over the world, which means that there are many subspecies. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, we are presented with a colony of Selkies who are native to Scotland, because Hogwarts is located in the Scottish Highlands. For the second trial of the Triwizard Tournament, Harry is forced to explore the depths of the Black Lake, the lake that surrounds the castle of Hogwarts, and to look for a loved one. If he doesn't find this person within the hour, this loved one is going to perish and be lost to the lake forever. Of course, this last part of the challenge is just a way of making the champions look as quick as possible, and Ron confirms it later on in the story. So while he is exploring the Black Lake and he encounters other aquatic creatures such as Grindylows, Harry sees a few merpeople through the windows of some ruins that are in the lake, and he's surprised by how different they look from their usual depictions, such as the one in the window from the prefect's bathroom. So this is how they are described in the book. The merpeople had grayish skin and long, wild, dark green hair. Their eyes were yellow, as were their broken teeth, and they wore thick ropes of pebbles around their necks. Their powerful silver fishtails beating the water, spears clutched in their hands. So in the book, the merpeople who inhabit the Black Lake are tasked with guarding the loved ones that have been taken from the champions, and they have to sing a song that is supposed to guide the champions towards their loved ones. When Harry talks with some of these merpeople, they explain that not only are they not allowed to interfere, but also they must prevent the champions from saving more than one hostage. In fact, when Harry tries to free Hermione, they attack him and they restrain him. But Harry threatens them with his wand, and he's able to bring both Ron and Fleur Delacour's little sister, Gabrielle, to the safety of the surface. While merpeople have appeared in a great number of mythologies from all over the world, today we will be focusing on the ones that are closest to Rowling, at least from a geographical point of view, which are the Greek sirens and the mermaids from the more folkloric Northern European tales. In the case of the sirens, they are usually described as a creature of half bird, half woman who lures sailors to destruction by the sweetness of her song. Similarly, the mermaids, Mesclid merman, were a fabled marine creature with the head and upper body of a human being and the tail of a fish. They were natural beings who, like fairies, had magical and prophetic powers. They loved music and often sang. Though very long-lived, they were mortal and had no souls. It is not clear when the change from bird legs to fishtail happened, but the fishtail does appear in an anonymous work from the 6th century after Christ, which is called, and I'm going to read it because in Latin, Liber Monstrorum de Diversis Generibus. There are theories that say that this change was inspired by the divinity Eurynome, a female divinity who is usually depicted with the upper body of a woman and a fishtail that accompanies it. In both cases, we find that these creatures have a love for music and that they use the voices to lure sailors and drown them wherever they are. While some northern tales have recorded, in a way, that relationships between mermaids and humans can be possible, they can seem somewhat forceful because the mermaids only stay with the human partners because they have stolen something from them. If the mermaid retrieves the object, she can go back to the water. Considering these descriptions that we have seen from both myths, it can be understood that Rowling took more inspiration from the northern folkloric tales than she took from the Greek mythology, taking into account that she chooses to give them fish tails instead of bird legs. While she does not describe them as particularly beautiful, which is more common in the northern folkloric tales, as exemplified by The Little Mermaid, the tale that we all know by Hans Christian Andersen, she does make a change in their role in the story because they do not show the characteristical homicidal tendencies that sirens have, or at least in the book. In fact, they only show aggressive behaviors towards Harry the moment he tries to break the rules of the tournament. And lastly, we reach one of the first sentient magical creatures that Harry encounters in his life, the Centaurs. They are introduced in the first book of the series, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, and the Wizarding World website describes them as a half-man, half-horse. They were mystical beings who were able to read the movements of the night sky in order to defy the future. Centaurs lived in herds and could be violent towards both outsiders and to members of their own group. Firenze was one such centaur who was exiled from his herd for helping the humans. In his first interaction with the Centaurs, Harry encounters Ronan, Bane, and Firenze in the Forbidden Forest. These are three Centaurs that show contrasting opinions towards the wizard kind, let's say. In this quote, we see first the description of Bane and then the description of Firenze. Into the clearing came, was it a man or a horse? To the waist, a man with red hair and beard, but below that was a horse's gleaming chestnut body with a long reddish tail. That would be Bane. This one looked younger. He had white blonde hair and a palomino body. He had astonishingly blue eyes like pale sapphires, and that would be Firenze. So while Bane is quite rude towards Harry and his companions, Firenze shows not only compassion, but a willingness to help Harry that actually baffles Bane. In fact, as we mentioned, Firenze is banned from his herd for his relationship with wizardkind. We can see that in the fifth book of the series, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when Hagrid introduces Grob to Harry and Hermione, they bumped into Bane. And this time, Bane openly shows his distaste for Firenze and his relationship with the wizards. At this time, Firenze had started working as a divination teacher in Hogwarts. Also, in this book, we find a clear example of the violent tendencies that Centaurs usually have, because later on in the story, when the herd is repeatedly insulted by Dolores Umbridge, who we know is one of the antagonists of the series, they retaliate by kidnapping her and dragging her to the depths of the Forbidden Forest. They try to do the same to Harry and Hermione, but Grob comes in to the rescue. He distracts the herd long enough for the two teenagers to make their escape. So just as she did with the giants, Rowling looked to the Greek myths for inspiration for her centaurs. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, centaurs were a race of creatures, part horse and part man. Their general character was that of wild, lawless, and inhospitable beings, the slaves of their animal passions. The centaur Chiron was not typical in this respect. While in origin, both the centaurs and the giants have a violent nature and tend to follow their more basic instincts, Rowling decided to differentiate these species by giving them, the centaurs, a more organized society and by giving them the ability to control themselves, an ability that her giants seem to lack. While she does maintain this violent nature to the giants, as we have mentioned with the kidnapping of Dolores Umbridge and all of that, she ultimately shows that when given the chance, centaurs are able to put aside the differences with wizardkind and fight a common foe. Still, she does maintain something from the original myth, which is the exception. We have mentioned Chiron in the original myth, who is a very gentle centaur who can control himself and who can act as the mentor for many Greek heroes, such as Achilles. And in Harry Potter, we have Firenze, who actually becomes a teacher in Hogwarts. So as we have seen, Rowling has remained somewhat loyal to the original myths, especially in terms of the physical descriptions, not taking into account that she eliminates the snake legs for the giants. In general, she maintains the colossal size of the giants, the fish tails of the northern mermaids, while eliminating the bird legs of the Greek sirens, and she, of course, maintains the horse legs of the centaurs. It is in their respective roles in the story that we see the biggest changes. While it is true that the three creatures show a violent behavior, at least at some point in the story, only the giants remain completely savage and therefore lose the war with Voldemort. In the case of the Merpeople, they do not participate in the Second Wizarding World, but they only show, as I said, a violent behavior when Harry tries to break the rules of the tournament. In fact, the interactions with the surface world are kept to a minimum, and they only appear in the second trial as a favor to Headmaster Dumbledore. And while it is true that the Centaurs become more aggressive as the series progresses, they respect Dumbledore enough to appear at his funeral, and they side with Harry and the Order of the Phoenix when the time to fight Voldemort comes. So I think that Rowling did not just include these creatures for the sake of expanding her world and making it more rich, which it does, nonetheless. I think she tried to show certain concepts through the implications of these creatures. For example, with the giants, she shows that barbarism and overall evil would not prevail in the end, no matter your size or how much power you have available. With the centaur, she shows that one can ignore one's basic instincts and fight for the greater good, even if you don't like the people that you're fighting with. And with the Merpeople, she shows the strength and almost peace that can be found in neutrality. So that would be all from my part. These are the works that I have cited in case you want to check them out, and thank you so much for listening.
So connecting all of these descriptions, representations of otherness with your talk later, do you think that the non-human others, besides, I think, I like your point, the conclusion you reached, the moral lesson that these three groups of non-human characters can teach us. But I would like to problematize the fact that we seem to have all of these non-human others on a hierarchy, depending on whose side they are, but also that they favor, but also in how well-behaved, civilized, cultured, spiritual they are, and how the ones that are not easily defined or refuse to be defined are basically kept very much on the margins and disappear into oblivion. Sorry, because I'm constantly problematizing, I think, issues, these type of issues with Rowling's saga.
I mean, sorry, I'm small. So yeah, that's definitely a really good comment. Of course, we all know that J.K. Rowling is not the best person in the world, and that she is definitely problematic in many of her opinions. And I do agree with you. I mean, while my talk was kind of like giving her an olive branch, I don't think that any of the characters that are non-human are presented in a good light, let's say, except for Dobby, who unfortunately, well, spoiler.
Yeah, she kills him.
Yes. The moment that a character that is non-human becomes actually liked, she gets rid of him. She actually does that with even humans. So I do think that creatures in general in Rowling's work are just there to push Harry, to show how he is not like the others because he's been bullied as a kid and he knows what it is to feel in the margins, to not feel appreciated, and he sees how the magical community treats others, and he tries to treat those others as belonging to the one. We see that with how he treats Dobby, despite his knowledge of how elves are treated, which I mean is wrong, obviously, because that is basically slavery, which Hermione fights. But he does that from the beginning, and he doesn't change it, and he helps liberate Dobby. He actually, in the 5th book, when Bane attacks them in the Forbidden Forest, and they try to kidnap Hermione and Harry, both Hermione and Harry try to explain themselves and to tell her that, no, we're not friends with her, we do not think these things about you, because Umbridge just starts giving them insults and starts calling them slurs, basically, which again, racism. And he tries to differentiate himself from the magical community, which in general is very racist towards non-human beings, even if they are called beings, like the giants. So, yeah, I think that these creatures are only there to push Harry into believing himself kind of like, again, a white savior, and to help the reader see how noble Harry is, how good he treats everyone, despite their race, despite their alignment. And the only moment that actually Harry shows some bad behavior, really bad behavior, is when he uses the Cruciatus curse. He uses a couple of times, I think. Once when Death Eater attacks McGonagall in the 7th book, and the other one with Bellatrix, I believe, in the 5th book after she kills Sirius. And obviously Harry is out of his mind and he's not controlling himself. But otherwise, all of his interactions with creatures, with beings, animals, whatever you want to call them, they are only there to push Harry's heroism. So